All right, welcome back to the Saw Shack. Time for a little comparison video. We've got a new Neo-Tec NS892 MS660 clone chainsaw, and we've got a Stihl MS660 real deal chainsaw. I'm going to try and minimize in this video me taking things apart and just keep this rig paused. When I come up with something to show you, I'll unpause it, I'll jabber for a minute, put you back on pause. I'm going to try and stay focused on just comparing part to part, piece to piece, quality differences that we can call out. In our first video, we already noticed a few things on this NS892 that were just a little bit lower quality or looser tolerances than what we would come to expect from a good OEM Stihl MS660 German chainsaw. So, we're going to see where we go with this one. If I start finding a lot of stuff, we might take them pretty far apart. I'm just really curious here. I really wanted to do this video before we got too much runtime on either of these saws. Both of these saws have less than 1 tank of runtime since new. So, should be a pretty good comparison one to the other. This will give us a good baseline on this Neo-Tec. We're planning on putting a lot of hours on this saw. I really want to see what wears out and how quickly on this thing. So this will be a good start. We'll be right back. All right, so right off the rip, we pop the filter covers off, and we've already got something that's a little surprising. Clone cover on the left, OEM cover on the right. Look at our summer-winter divider. This Neo-Tec saw came out of the box with the summer-winter divider in the winter position. That's great if you're running in the winter. That's something to keep in mind if you buy one of these saws. Most of us are not in a climate where we need to be using that winter divider down there. That's allowing hot air from the cylinder into that carb box to help keep the carb from freezing up. In the summertime, or even in a mild climate, that's going to get her a little bit hot on you. So if you buy one of these, make sure to pop this off and make sure that that summer-winter divider is in the suitable location for your climate. Got the filters off both saws. Nothing too notable here. Just general differences in the overall casting quality of the parts, and little pieces that could be trimmed off on the edges of the clone saw, but at the end of the day they're not really going to hurt much. Everything seems fine and functional there so far. OEM for comparison. Closer look in the carb boxes. NS892, MS660. Nothing really stands out. The 892 does use a different style fuel vent than the OEM Stihl. Other than that, visually speaking, not many differences there. As we get more runtime on this 892, we will see how the carburetor performs, whether it's metering fuel properly or whether there's some room for improvement there. But visually, nothing stands out. Both look just fine. Now, one thing we did note on our initial inspection of that 892, it does have an additional port in the muffler cover versus this OEM does not. However, this is an East Coast market 660, does not have a 3/4 wrap handle, does not have the larger clutch cover. That could be something that these saws had on the West Coast. It's not uncommon for there to be small differences like that. Also worth noting, the 892 does not have a spark arrestor screen, and it's got a fairly large exhaust port compared to this OEM 660, which of course does have a spark arrestor screen, and it's got a fairly small exhaust port from the factory right there. For comparison, there's quite a difference. This port looks more like the port on the old 066 we've got on the other side of the shop there. There's something you won't see on an OEM 660 or any other OEM Stihl that I'm aware of. A lock washer under the muffler bolt heads. Both of the muffler bolts into the cylinder on this Neo-Tec clone saw had lock washers on them. One thing worth noting, OEM Stihl versus Neo-Tec, they do have a heat shield foil stick-on under the muffler like the OEM. However, it does not extend as far up toward your crankshaft in the area of your case down here, or as far up onto the clutch side as the OEM does. Now, there's plenty of these saws out there running that do not have a foil heat shield there at all. It may not make a big difference, but the more of that heat from the muffler you can keep out of your crankcase there, the better. Comparing the Neo-Tec exhaust port with a little view of the piston and the OEM exhaust port with a little view of the piston. Not too much to notate there. Nothing stands out as being abnormal on this clone saw. We were moving on to the next step, which was going to be going ahead and popping these cylinders off to get a better look on the inside of them, see what the casting quality looks like, and most importantly, see what the plating looks like in this aftermarket unit. Now, here's a little inconvenience. You see how on this OEM saw, the clamp on this intake boot is nice and easily accessible. You can see the screw head for it here. Let me add some light for you. You can see the screw head for it right there. One of the nicer things about these 660s is that you've got enough room here. You can take your clamp off your intake manifold, go ahead and unbolt your cylinder and pop it right off. On this clone saw, we look down in here, that clamp, the screw head is facing downward, but this is what's really concerning. Look where the end of the screw is. The end of the screw is up against that cylinder fin. That makes us wonder if it's even really as tight as it should be. When that thing was assembled, did that get tight? Or did they run out of room because it was bottoming out on the cylinder? With this clamp flipped over, there would have been plenty of room, and we could go ahead and undo it to pop this cylinder off. Now, we're gonna have to dig in here a little bit more just to get that off. Since we had to take it off, a little closer look at the carburetor from the Neo-Tec clone saw. We're not going to take the carburetor off of the OEM saw because I don't see any reason to. The manifold clamp's positioned properly, and we can go ahead and pop the cylinder off without fooling with that. Overall, the appearance of the clone carburetor looks fine. Again, it's a carburetor. What's more important than how it looks is how it meters the fuel. We will need to put some hours on this saw to see if it's accomplishing that goal properly. That will be in some upcoming videos. We're going to try and really nail down how this clone saw runs compared to how this 660 runs. All right, things are getting interesting here. We've got the cylinder off of our Neo-Tec clone saw. Very interesting. We've got quite a bit of debris down in here. Remember, this saw does not have a tank of runtime on it. This saw has never been put under a load, has never had a bar and chain put on it. It's been fueled, it's been started twice and ran gently. No super high RPMs, just varying throttles, no load, just to help things kind of run in a little bit, and more than anything for our needs, to try and determine if it's running correctly or if it needs repairs before we can even use it. The crankshaft, we've got some metal shavings down in here. Right here on our gasket, we can see some little strings of metal wedged between the gasket and the crankcase. Between the gasket and the cylinder, we had some metal filings, and it's already starting to show some negative consequences. We have, on the exhaust side of this piston, some light scuffing already. So it'll be really interesting to see how that goes moving forward. We're going to clean that out as good as we can. If you're out there, if you're going to buy one of these clone saws, you might want to go ahead and take it apart and clean this stuff out of there if you really expect it to last a while. So who knows? In the cylinder itself, the plating, for the most part, looks okay. Look up there above the exhaust port. We've already got some scuffing going on, probably from those metal shavings that shouldn't have been in there. It's also worth noting, if we can get a good picture of it, you see this lower transfer right there at the corner of it. Got some plating chipping. Upper transfer, got some plating chipping right there at the corner. It's not a good sign for the life of this cylinder. We've got some plating chipping away. Maybe that plating didn't adhere very well from the manufacturing process. We'll see. Hopefully it doesn't progressively get worse, because if it does, then this thing's probably going to have a pretty short life. We'll find out though. Let's see, here's a good shot of that plating right there. Even the varying looks in this plating is concerning. With almost no run time, we've got some areas that are a little shinier than others. Perhaps this is not machined perfectly round. Maybe the piston's not machined perfectly round. We've got a little bit more contact area in certain places than others. Maybe there's a little room for that piston to rock around in there. All of those things can help them wear a little bit faster and make sure that this thing does not last as long as we would hope. So we'll see. Here's a little bit better look. This is the bottom ring. It's starting to wear in there a little bit with about 3 minutes of run time. So, you know, it's good if it wears in quickly. The quicker the rings wear in and seat to those cylinder walls, the quicker you're going to make whatever power you're going to make. But we'll see how that holds up for longevity. I'm really looking forward to, after putting some hours on this saw, tearing it back down, seeing what it really looks like. Now that we've got this thing torn down, seems like every time I turn around, I'm filming something else. I don't know if you can tell in this video, but our wrist pin is very loose inside of that piston. That is definitely not going to last very long, no matter how we treat it. That's pretty concerning. I suspect we've got a really good chance of having a pretty catastrophic failure there. Also, our circlips here on the piston are the style that do have these long fingers that come off of them. Let me see if I can get you a little bit better light. With these lower quality aftermarket circlips that have that finger coming off of them, I've definitely taken apart some saws where those little clips broke and caused a failure. Will that be what causes our failure? Or will it be the slop in that piston pin? I don't know. The crank itself, the big end of the rod, although of course has tons of side to side, doesn't seem to have a lot of up and down. it might ride okay when it's all together. Nothing else is jumping right out as being an issue down here, so we might be okay down there. But like I said, we've got a lot of play in that wrist pin. Definitely not off to a good start for the clone saw. Really wanted to investigate a little further there. We went ahead and popped the piston off. We could see the wrist pin here. Like we mentioned, it's loose as a goose. Should be pretty darn snug in there, especially as this aluminum piston starts to warm up and this steel wrist pin warms up and they expand at different rates. We're not off to a good start with that loose of a fit. And then the main reason I went ahead and popped that piston off, I wanted to see what our fitment was like in this cylinder. We're pretty darn loose in here. May be tough to tell on the camera, but I'll go ahead and tell you, we're loose. So, could that cause some issues? Are we gonna wear piston skirts out? What do you guys think? Leave your comment, make your bets. Will this saw fail because we wore a piston skirt out? Look at that. It's been ran twice, not under a load, and it's trying to. Or will this saw fail? The wrist pin failure up here. Or is it going to be something else? You tell me. Another look at our debris. You can see up right next to that bolt hole. Nice big metal shaving right there. Lots of little metal shavings all around this gasket. These are wedged between the cylinder and the case. So if they were there, they were probably everywhere when they put the thing together. All right, here we are. OEM 660. Low hour saw. I originally thought this saw had about a tank. I'm thinking more like maybe 2 to 3 tanks now, just because we do have a tad bit of carbon on top of the piston there. But definitely this saw spent more time sitting around waiting to be used than it did being used. So I'm just going to try and get you some good angles down in here of the OEM cylinder, and then side by side some good angles of the aftermarket cylinder. I've already called out that the plating has some chips in it on this aftermarket cylinder. The combustion chambers definitely are a little bit different casting quality. That roughness up there, I could definitely see that holding on to some carbon, whereas that OEM might have a better chance of not collecting carbon deposits. But you know, if your oil mix and your running habits and your tuning are creating carbon, then you're gonna have carbon probably. So definitely some casting differences comparing those transfers. The edges of the ports, this OEM cylinder's got a really nice transition for those rings on that exhaust port. It's a little bit harsher on this aftermarket cylinder. There's the other transfers on the OEM. Transfers on the aftermarket with chipped plating. Intake side. Aftermarket, intake side. Remember, we left the boot on this one because that clamp was upside down. We weren't able to take the clamp off, so we had to go ahead and pull the carburetor off to take this cylinder off with the boot. And you see here, the way that clamp's positioned, they've run the screw right up into there. It does seem to be tight. That's the good thing. So it probably wasn't going to leak, and that wouldn't be an issue until it was time to take it apart. While we've got this apart, we're going to go ahead and flip that clamp, because the next time I take this apart, I'd rather it be easier. I don't think we will take the recoils apart on these saws. The recoil on this aftermarket saw seems to function properly. We will call out that this OEM 660 does have the plastic flywheel fins, whereas this Neo-Tec clone does have a one-piece cast aluminum flywheel, which appears to have a bent fin right there. Yep, that's interesting. Maybe I'll go ahead and take this thing apart and we can look at it closer. I'm not sure what could have caused that unless it was cast that way. Definitely will call out Neo-Tec has a regular starter handle. OEM has the elasto start. Not everybody likes elasto starts. That's okay. I kind of like them, especially if you're going to take that decomp off. It's nice to have a little bit of cushion there, and I really haven't had one fail on me. So, you know, to each his own on that one, but it's worth calling out. Again, here's our new clone saw. We're going to clean the metal shavings out of this rig, and we're going to pop it back together. We're going to pop the OEM back together. I think that's really what we needed to know on these. We definitely called out some concerning things on this Neo-Tec clone saw. How long will it last? Well, I'm not going to try and predict that. We're going to run it. We're going to make some more videos. I want to know, does it make the power of the OEM saw? Does it hold up like the OEM saw? Does it handle like the OEM saw? Does it start like the OEM saw? What differences will you notice running your Neo-Tec clone saw versus if you had an OEM saw? Is the OEM saw worth 3 to 4 times the money to go out and track down a nice condition low hour 660? Or are you better off to buy 2 or 3 clone saws? Fix them as they break. I don't know. We'll see how long this one lasts. I think this one will have a better chance at living than your typical clone saw. We are going to get some of these metal filings out of the case. That certainly won't hurt it. So we'll see. I think that's a good place to stop this video. Our next video, I hope, we are going to put these saws in some wood. I really want to get some hours on this clone saw and see how it does. I've got a variety of bars and chains. Definitely have some 20s, has some 24s, got a 32 and a 36. Probably gonna try and just run them with a 24, at least at first. If I can find us a nice big hardwood log to sink a 36 into, that's definitely what we're gonna do, because that's a good time. So stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe so you can see those next videos. If you have any questions about these saws that I didn't answer, leave a comment and I'll try to make a video, or at least reply to your comment there and answer that. If there's anything I'm missing, I've got both of these saws. They're both mine. They're not going anywhere. So they're here. We've got a test mule from OEM and one from Neo-Tec. So let's see what we can learn from them. Until then, get out there, throw some chips.